talking about the absolute, and if there is any, I wonder if there is any purpose in the absolute.
No. The
yes,
absolute
and this,
has no purpose.
This question you answer for me through her question.
Yeah.
And then the question is, so we human beings create the purpose, that it's so important that to have a purpose, and actually we don't need a purpose.
No, on the human level it's important you have a purpose. Yeah.
But the absolute have no purpose.
Yeah. The essence have no purpose.
So
the problem is when you're just when you on the human level, but when you're just identified with the human and the human's purpose, then this is when you get into suffering, because you're so identified with your purpose and your meaning in this life, it becomes so important. So it's like balancing the two. But the human, if the human tries to give itself therapy through non-duality, it'll be a disaster. The human needs purpose. Like the human that doesn't have purpose will more than likely be depressed. But it's also not so important, your purpose. Like, really your purpose is just to be. Like, it's just to be whatever you're doing. Like, so it's not so important. But when you're just identified with the human form, like the mind begins to mix up survival, so the purpose of our society, with its identity, and then it gets so invested in it. And then if it doesn't go the way it wants, or if it doesn't happen, then it creates so much suffering. And you begin to seek for freedom in your purpose, whereas your freedom is being here. Your freedom is this experience now. Whereas when you're just identified with the person, then you mix up that freedom and you think, my freedom is in saving humanity or saving other people or spreading this message. Whereas your freedom, what you're truly looking for, is coming home, which is right here, now, this. It's the absolute.
If I understand you right, so you mean to be conscious about both? Give us a good balance? It's
not that you're conscious about both. So I'll show you through physical description how I think it happens. So before, what happens, so this is the character, this hand is the character, is the person, is your personality, and this is the absolute. And before, when you're identified, you think the person is conscious. So they're totally mixed together. So you think that you as a person are conscious and looking out of your eyes, and you think that person has a name, a body, an identity. And then what happens in awakening is they begin to separate. Like, so it begins to become, the consciousness is less identified with the personality structure, and it begins to separate. And then it turns round. And then, predominantly, like in every moment, what's happening is what's looking out is the essence, is no thing appearing as everything, or consciousness, whatever you call it. So the essence is looking out, and then in that comes and goes a character. So what most people think, though, is the character wakes up, and the character gets consciousness. Whereas it's the opposite way around. This consciousness takes over, and then the character comes and goes in that consciousness, in that stillness. So actually the person, it's not about holding them together, it's an energetic shift that will naturally happen as this subject is explored. And it's not really to do with you. Like Ramesh Balsakar used to say, your head is in the tiger's mouth. Like, as soon as you get into this subject, you're like, you're done for. But it's not really your doing. Nothing's really your doing. We think that everything's our doing. But it's a very narcissistic way of looking at things. Like, we don't really know how we speak. We don't really know how we see, or how we breathe, or how we beat the heart, or how we even move a hand. We've got a storyteller that's like, I move my hand. I'm going to move my hand. I'm going to speak, but I don't know how this happens. Like, I squeeze my throat and make sounds. But really, it's just happening. It's coming out. Looking and hearing and speaking is happening. When I was a kid, I think I was a little bit weird as a kid, but they named me as dyslexic, so I got away with it, with maybe like dyspraxia as well. But I remember we used to walk down the alleyway home, like a small alleyway that echoed, and I'd be walking along and I'd be like, Mum, look, the legs are walking. And she'd be like, yes, Lisa. And I'd be like, but look, they walk. And I just used to be so amazed that I didn't have to do anything and the legs walked. Like that's amazing. And it's happening to us all the time. All the time. You're sitting there and you think that you're holding your back up, or that you're sitting there and you're doing it, but actually it's happening. And what a relief that is. Like, what a relief. It's happening all the time. But we have this storyteller that's always like, I'm doing it. Me, 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 me. It's mine. they say, scientists, like, I've never done this experiment and I'm not a scientist, but from things that I've read, they say that, so we make a choice, so a choice is made in the body or in the unconscious, and then 6 seconds later, we tell the story of making the choice. So we're like choosing between Coca-Cola or like a smoothie, or like healthy smoothie, and we think that it's us that's making the choice, but our body, so 6 seconds before we go, okay, I'm going for the cola, our body has already made the choice. And then we tell a story about it being our choice and it belongs to us, which is really quite amazing and funny and sweet and endearing. It's what's happening to animals. I remember when I said to my dad that I didn't think the dogs thought, or if they thought, it was very simplistic, but because they don't have language, they don't think. He was like, don't be ridiculous. How would they do anything if they didn't think? But there's so much we do where we don't think, that we tell ourselves we do it because we think. Like when I'm driving, I'm certainly not thinking. As soon I drive between England and Europe, I live in France, so I'm always like changing between, I have an English car, so I drive on the, what side do I drive on in an English car? I get so confused by it all. Yeah, left. So, and then I drive in France and I go back to England. If I thought about it, I would crash. Like my rule is I don't think about it, and if I begin to panic, I just pull over. So I just go for it. It's so confusing going between the two. Like a roundabout. I go back to England and straight away there's a roundabout, and I'm like, and I just have to trust the body will do it. And it does. Like I've done this for years, like 8 years or something. And as soon as I begin to think about it, like which way do I go at the roundabout, I get into panic, and then I'm like, ugh. Like it happens. The same with like riding the bike. And this is why we sometimes like extreme things, like extreme sports, because we stop thinking. Like you can't think when you're skiing. Like it happened to me once. I was skiing. I'm not a good skier, but I decided to think when I was like on a black slope, which means a very hard one. And then for 3 hours, I just got stuck laying down. Like I couldn't do anything. I just had to lay there. Like you can't think doing these things. And normally you have a crash and you make a mistake when you begin to think. Like it happens. And who's doing that? You could say the body is like on automatic, which fair enough, maybe it is. But who still is doing that automatic? Like, so you're like, okay, the body's on automatic, but still, who does that? Like, who's doing the automatic? We're always saying it's me, but who? In that moment of being on automatic, we're still convinced it belongs to us. So another way you can look at it is like your telephone, like Siri. So Siri doesn't have free will, we don't think. I mean, we're going to have this problem with AIs in the future, and I'm sure that AIs are going to start wanting their freedom. Like, and they're going to start wanting pensions and like social security, and to be treated like a real person and not a slave. But we presume that Siri doesn't have any free will. But yet Siri appears like he has, mine's a he, has a free will. Like, so he speaks to me and I say to him, Siri, can you pull up this and do this for me? And he does it. And he asks me questions. And we assume that he doesn't have free will, but he's always evolving, just like we are. So he evolves to the way that I interact with him, and he's learning about me and evolving, just like our machines are. We say it's us that's evolving, it's us that's learning, whereas actually it's our machinery that's learning and updating and being reprogrammed, and it's so much more complicated than we can possibly think about. It's so complicated the way this instrument is working, but we're so convinced it belongs to us, and that idea that it belongs to you, and that you are somebody, a separate entity that belongs inside the body, I would suggest is all your suffering in this life. It's not your screwed up childhood or your traumas, although I do suggest healing them, but I don't think they'll ever end, because you'll heal a trauma and then something else will happen. Like, you like got one, you're like, you know, when you're at the park and you're hitting down those little things that come up, you're like, yes, got a trauma, got a trauma, got a trauma, and then another one pops up. It won't end. You'll never get to this place where you get perfect conditioning, or you get out of being conditioned. It's something that's always evolving and always happening. But we think often that it's about like becoming a perfect conditioned being and getting over our childhood and getting over our problems. But your freedom actually is remembering who you are, and then your conditioning is either painful or pleasurable. And I always recommend you to condition yourself in positive ways. Like, I'm not against reconditioning yourself. Yes.